Hi, today I'm going to show you guys how to brew an American Pale Ale, and I'm going to be using a similar recipe to what I did on my last Pale Ale, the extract version, except I'm going to be changing the hops in this one, and I'm going to be doing the all grain version of it. So for instead of the dry malt extract, what I'm going to use is 2-row pale malt. It's going to be 10 pounds of that. I'm going to be using 3/4 pounds of caramel 40 Lovibond, and then 1/4 pound of caramel 60 Lovibond, and then I'm going to be using 1/4 pound of carapils. Now for hops, I'm going to be using Citra pellet hops. This is a 14% alpha acid pellet hops, so I'm going to be using half of that for bittering and the other half for aroma hops. I'm going to keep the hop schedule very simple, so I'm not going to do a whole lot with it. And then for yeast, I'm going to be trying out the American Ale yeast blend WLP 060, and I'm going to see how that turns out. So that's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple recipe, and the first thing that we're going to have to do here is I'm going to take some of the boiling water that I have going on right now, and I'm just going to heat up my pot. So basically, I'm just going to pour hot water on the walls of the pot. Make sure this thing heats up. I'm just going to throw that water back in here. Throw the lid on. Okay, now I want to make sure that my water, I'm going to be mashing in with 3 gallons and 3/4 at 160 degrees. So I'm just going to let this water cool down to about 166 degrees, and then I'm going to be adding that water to the grains. So in the meantime, I'm just going to throw in my grains in there. Okay, so now we just wait for the water to cool down to 166 degrees, and we'll be mashing in. Okay, so our water has reached about 170, 168 degrees. So I'm going to start adding water slowly, and I'm going to try to add about 3 gallons at first and see where I stand there. Make adjustments as I go. Okay, so I've added about 3 gallons so far, and now I'm going to stir this up a little bit. Make sure I don't have any dough balls or anything forming up. And let the water mix in with the grains and see where I stand with temperature. So right now the mash is pretty thick. Alright, so now I'm just going to go ahead and throw in the rest of the water in there to make the 3 gallons and 3/4. There we go. So look right there. Okay. And we want to go ahead and stir. Just make sure we don't have any hot spots, no dough balls or anything like that. Okay, so we're about 158 degrees. I'm going to add a little bit of water at room temperature, and that should bring it down. You don't need to add a whole lot. Make sure you stir. Alright, here we go. Okay, so now we're just going to leave this sitting here for about an hour. And in the meantime, I'm going to start heating up more water so I can sparge, and also so I can keep the temperature stable here at 154. We are at about 155 degrees, so we're going to see how well it maintains the temperature and keep track of all of that. Also, at this time, you want to do any water adjustments that you want to make. Now in my case, I have RO water, which is essentially the same thing as distilled water. And I'm going to add a heaping half a teaspoon of gypsum salt. Then I'm going to add half teaspoon of calcium chloride, and this is going to be flush. I'm just going to give this one last stir to mix in. Okay. There we go. Alright, so we're still good. Now we're just going to wait about an hour, and I'm going to be adjusting the temperature as I go. Alright, so 60 minutes have gone by, and now what we're going to do is we're going to do a mash out. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to bring our temperature in our mash tun to about 170 degrees, 165 to 170 degrees. So I'm just going to add boiling water to this until I reach that temperature. Okay. All right, so you're at 172 degrees. Now we're gonna start draining our wort. Now before we do that, we want to recirculate the wort until we get a clear wort coming out. So the way we're gonna do this, we're just going to open up our valve slowly and just drain about 2 or 3 quarts until this starts coming out clear. Right now this is pretty cloudy. Okay. So now we're going to let this drain slowly, and we're just going to spar. So we're going to wait until our grain bed, until the water's about an inch above the grain bed, and we're going to keep adding water slowly. We're going to try and keep our temperature at about 170 degrees to avoid any kind of stuck sparges or anything like that. It helps it flow a little more freely. Okay, so as this is draining, what I'm doing here is just adding water and making sure that the grains are not settling down. So I'm always keeping about an inch of water above the grain bed. And I'm doing this slowly, and I'm also trying to keep the temperature right around 165 degrees, 170 degrees throughout the whole lautering process. Okay, so I'm done collecting all my wort. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this wort back into the pot. Well, actually first I'm going to empty all the grains from my mash tun, and then I'm going to put the wort back into the pot. I'm going to boil it, and then we'll just continue as usual as if we were doing an extract brew. Right, so I've gotten all the grains out of the pot, and now I'm transferring the wort that I had in my bucket back into the pot. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add half an ounce of the Citra hops, and this is going to be our bittering hops. Okay, and we're going to start bringing our wort to a boil. So I'm bringing this up to a boil as I'm transferring the wort, and what's going to happen next is we're going to boil this for 60 minutes, and after that we're going to add our aroma hops. But for the meantime, we just want to bring it to a boil, watch out for boilovers, and we also want to make sure that we have a slow rolling boil and that we stir throughout the 60 minutes. So I'm going to stir about every 15 to 20 minutes. Once the temperature reaches about 200 degrees, I like to take my top off That way I know if I can look out for boilovers, and that's when you want to be looking out for your wort to start rising, and you want to be close to your regulator, so if the wort starts rising, you just need to turn down the heat a little bit until you can control the boil here. So right now we're about 206 degrees. We should start boiling in about 6 degrees more. Starting to see a little bit of bubbles coming up, so there's a foam that starts to form on top of the boil. You want to remove that as much as you can. Just push it off to one side. So that's what's going to make the wort start to rise when this thing starts to boil. So that's pretty much all you do for now. Okay, so this thing's starting to rise, so I'm turning down the heat a little bit, just enough to let this top settle down. This is the foam that makes your wort rise, so whenever you can, try to push that off to the side. It's what they call the hot break. So once you control your boil, now you just start counting down 60 minutes and just come in and stir this every once in a while, and just make sure you keep a slow rolling boil. There's no need to boil it too vigorous. And that's pretty much it. Alright, so after the 60 minutes have gone by, all you gotta do is turn off the heat. Make sure you give your wort one last stir. This is going to send it into a whirlpool. That way you can get all the wort out of there and keep all the junk out of your fermenter. And now it's just time to cool down the beer. So I'm going to take our wort chiller here. Make sure this is extremely clean, sanitized. So now we just turn this on, and it should cool down in about 30 minutes. And last thing, right when your wort reaches about 180 degrees, we're going to add our next set of hops. Okay, so we're at about 190 degrees, so I'm going to go ahead and add my last set of hops. It's just half an ounce of the other Citra hops that I have left. Okay, our wort has been cooling down, and once it reaches your yeast pitching temperature, what you want to do is just remove your wort chiller. And now we're going to get ready to transfer this to our fermenter. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a strainer in our bucket. And now I'm just going to let this drain. Into it just like that. So the strainer is going to help us aerate the wort, splash the wort into the bucket, and that's going to just help it aerate it. Once we transfer all of our wort into our fermenter, we're going to take our starter and we're going to pitch our yeast just like that. Okay, so once we pitch our yeast, we want to place our lid and we want to shake the bucket a little bit just to make sure that yeast mixes in with the beer. Okay, now our next step is just going to be to place our fermenter in our fridge, and we're going to ferment this for 2 weeks.
like
Just
the
you just
aroma
randomly
of it.
combine caramel, malt, hops, and you're fine.
Let's do it.
All right,
Grab
that's
one,
that.
we'll see. Line this up. We're missing two.